I'm Carmine Gallo with Dorie Clark. I'm thrilled to be able to talk to her. She teaches executive education at two business schools at Duke and Columbia. She is the author of several books, including the one I just read cover to cover, The Long Game, or The Long Game, How to Be a Long-Term Thinker in a Short-Term World. Dorie, congratulations, bestseller. Good for you.
Carmine, thank you so much. I'm so glad to finally get a chance to talk with you live. I've been a fan of your work for a long time, so it's great to connect.
And I've been a fan of yours too. Here, we'll put it right there. Love it. Long-term thinking, short-term world. Okay, it takes a brave person to write about long-term thinking, Dorie, because as you know, we are all about instant gratification. We want the higher paycheck now, the bigger title now. Investors want that company to make a profit this quarter, not to build for 3 quarters out. And you're trying to reframe people and get them to think long-term. How do you define long-term thinking in one's career? Because we're really talking about careers here for this conversation. How do you define long-term thinking?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different ways that one could look at long-term thinking. My quick back of the hand definition is long-term thinking fundamentally is about asking ourselves what we can do today that will make tomorrow better. And it certainly could be as simple as literally tomorrow in small things. But broadly speaking, what I'm really talking about at a fundamental level is what are the small steps we can do such that 5 years from now, 10, 20 years from now, the time's going to pass anyway. How do we make it more likely that the outcomes we actually achieve are as close as possible to the ones that we would hope to have?
Dorie, we're having this conversation right smack in the middle of what is being called the Great Resignation or the Big Quit. I like that term even more, the Big Quit. People are quitting their jobs in record numbers, and a good number of them, up to 1/3 from what I've been able to see in certain surveys, want to start their own businesses as well. So this brings up a question that I hear all the time. I'm sure you do as well, from business students, recent grads, and business professionals, which is, how do I find my true passion, my true calling? In the long game, you have what I think is a powerful concept. I like to talk about it. You say one way to find your true passion or your meaning in life and in your career is to optimize for interesting. Let's dive into that. Explain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right, Carmine. There's a lot of cultural pressure toward finding our passion. That, this is considered in Western society, especially American society, as being one of the highest callings you can have. You need to find your passion. You need to follow your passion. And certainly, I don't want to knock that. If you have a passion that you want to follow, then that's amazing. But what I have found as a kind of problematic use case is that for a lot of good people, good, smart people, they just may not know what their passion is. They may have lots of different things they're interested in. They may not have found the thing. And I think there's a lot of passion shaming in our culture. Like, oh, poor you. You don't know your passion. I guess you can't possibly do anything with your life until you find it. But of course, this is the worst possible way to ever come close to finding your passion or even getting things done, is to just sit there beating your head against a wall saying, why don't I know my passion? My strategy instead is what I call optimize for interesting. And the basic idea is, look, it doesn't have to be your soulmate of activities. Just go on some dates. Just find things that are interesting to you. Now, it's clear, of course, you will get bad outcomes if you are choosing a profession or an interest or whatever that is solely about money. You don't care about it. It's sort of soul deadening. That's not good for anybody over the long term. But it also doesn't have to be your meaning in life. If it is just something that's reasonably interesting to you, keep pursuing that. You'll learn more. You'll get data. And it either will become a passion or it can help lead you to one if you so desire.
That's a good point. I like optimize for interesting. It reminded me when I was reading your book of a period in my life when I was making a transition from full-time journalism to having my own practice and writing books, doing what I do now. and I explored things that I thought would be interesting. So in Silicon Valley, I took a job as in business development for a startup. That wasn't my calling, but I learned some valuable skills. Then I went into PR for a global public relations firm. Not my calling. So I'm figuring out what I don't want to do, but I'm learning valuable skills and, more importantly, meeting the people who would help me when I set up my own practice. But it's that following things that I think are interesting. They may not be your ultimate passion. They may not be your ultimate purpose in your career, but go down a more interesting path.
That's exactly right. You don't lose anything by doing it, because you're getting more information about what you do enjoy. You're picking up skills along the way, and thank goodness we're not indentured servants. You can stop if you don't like it. And with all of those things, it's far more effective to learn by doing rather than just ideating and imagining and perhaps creating untrue hypotheses in our mind because they're not tested.
Let's talk about a theme that runs through your books, your online courses, and I know you've got LinkedIn courses through LinkedIn Learning. And that theme is persuasion, convincing people to act on your ideas. Now, you say that today's workplace is more collaborative than ever. Would that imply that your ability to persuade people to follow your ideas in that collaborative work environment is also a crucial skill?
I think persuasion is extraordinarily important in general and is only becoming more important every day.
How so?
There's a few reasons for it. The first is certainly the workplace has become much more collaborative. Now, this is good in some ways. It's also bad in others. I recently interviewed Rob Cross, who is the author of a new book called Overcoming Collaboration Overload. So we're beginning to realize that there is so much coordination, sometimes, bureaucratic style coordination that's necessary. It often holds organizations up, it holds people up from actually accomplishing things. So, collaboration may not necessarily be a great thing, but it is, at least at present, a fact of life. And in terms of collaboration, the key part here, this is not giving orders to people and saying, do this. First of all, that usually doesn't go over well, even if you had the power to do it. But in these cases, you are mostly coordinating with people who are in different offices, different divisions, different departments. They don't report to you. They don't have to do it. And yet they do have the capacity to make your life and your progress pretty miserable if they don't want to help. So how can we ensure that in a situation where people are doing things voluntarily, that we are able to be persuasive enough so that they believe that helping you is actually something that will be good for them as well?
Can you give us, based on your years of experience teaching executive education and also LinkedIn Learning and your online courses, what are some of the most important elements of persuasion that any business professional can learn?
Yeah, there's a few key principles that we can use with persuasion. Now, the first one, of course, is setting the tenor of the relationship from the outset. Now, certainly there are some situations where you're dealing with someone once, you need a very tiny specific thing, and that's it. But in a lot of cases in the corporate world, you are in an ongoing relationship with people. And especially since we've made the transition to virtual or hybrid connections, there often is a tendency for people to really shift into a transactional mode where it's like, okay, I've been on 14 hours of Zoom calls. I just have to get through this. Carmine, where's the thing? I need the thing. And, it works up to a certain extent, certainly if you have pre-existing political capital. But for people with whom you don't have a strong relationship, or over time, if you just keep behaving in that transactional way where the person really doesn't feel like you know them, they don't feel like you care about them, the request is not going to go over well, because eventually they are going to realize, oh, I have veto power over this treatment of me, and my veto power is not doing the thing that you want. And they may start exercising it. So I think the first piece is about creating the context of the relationship. Now, the second piece in terms of persuasion is actually framing for the person how their piece fits into the whole. Now, again, if it's an emergency, if it's a rush, sometimes you can just say, do this, and that works when it's necessary. But in most situations, people, we're going to sound very Marxist here. People don't want to be a cog in the machine. Right. They want to be able to contribute to the whole. And it is on us as leaders and as professionals to help them understand how their small piece of it actually is contributing to the overall effort, so they can feel pride of ownership, and so that they can understand contextually why you might be badgering them for this thing that seems weird or seems irrelevant, but actually is really quite important to the overall mission. And I would say a third piece in terms of persuasion is actually just ensuring that you are sufficiently clear with your ask. Sometimes we fail to get what we want because we are creating shortcuts in our own mind. We assume we've conveyed things that we haven't. Other people may not understand the urgency of a situation. They may not understand specifically what you want them to do as compared to their colleagues. And so we have to double check that other people are even clear on what we're trying to persuade them to do.
Dorie, you brought up relationships, and it seems to me, based on your understanding of persuasion, that relationships, as you said at the beginning, is foundational to persuasion. You have to build those strong relationships. So let's take a deeper dive into a topic that you write about in the long game, and that's professional networking, which I think sometimes gets either a bad rap, you got to network, always be networking, or it's misunderstood. In the long game, you have 3 different types of networking, and I'd like to visit each one. But before we do, personally, you seem like somebody who's constantly building relationships for the long term in your own professional career. Would that be accurate?
I'm certainly trying to, yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about then, what is it? First of all, the definition, before we get into the 3 types. What do you mean by networking when you hear that term?
Yeah, so networking is often a very loaded term. Some people despise even the word because they assume that it means that somehow someone's being conned. Yeah. That I need a thing, and it is about getting that thing. I actually prefer to think of networking as the way that adults make friends. And I think this is really important because it is actually incredibly hard to make friends once you are out of college or once you're out of graduate school. And for a lot of adults, especially professionals who may have kids, it's not always easy. But it's a really important need. And I think if we can actually reconfigure networking from being, it's a chore, it's like a business development chore, to actually thinking, how can I enhance the quality of my life by meeting interesting new people? And maybe that'll turn up fascinating possibilities. Who knows? Well, then it's actually a lot more special and a lot more meaningful for the entirety of our life, not just our professional life. And I don't think anyone would feel sleazy about it.
I think building relationships and friends, as you've said, in the adult and professional world is so profoundly important, especially based on many of the most successful people who I've met. So I'm glad you focus on it. Let's take a deep dive into the 3 types of professional networking that you write about in the long game, because I like the way you divide them up. You get people to think a little differently. So number 1, first, there is short-term networking. I assume this is what most people do, and maybe nothing more. Short-term networking, define it, please.
Yeah, this is certainly the stereotype of networking. This is what I would call bad networking. It's, oh boy, I really need some investors. Let's go to this cocktail party, and then I can meet some people who will give. Do
we have a guest? Thank you for that. Who's our guest?
Oh, thank you. Yes, this is my my special guest, Philip, who likes to periodically make cameo appearances. So He wanted to network with you, Carmine.
Philip and I are friends. Excellent. Okay, so
Yes,
short-term
you can see him
networking.
right here.
Oh, I love it. Just keep him back there. It's terrific. Okay, so short-term networking. Yeah, this is what most people do, especially in conferences. They shove the business card in your hand. Well, not anymore. Now it's I'm gonna send you. I'll airdrop you a contact.
Yeah.
But I
Shove the QR
understand
code
it.
at
This
ya.
is what most people do. And you have to understand that this is not something that professionals, especially professionals in any type of power or where you want something from them eventually, that's not the way to make friends.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it feels really distasteful for any of us, I think, if you feel like, oh, wow, this person only wants me for one thing. It's like, whatever, dating is always the analogy, but it's like, oh, this person only is interested in me because they think I have money or something like that. That's not the kind of person you want to marry, much less interact with. And it's very much the same thing for professional contacts.
We can't always avoid short-term networking, though. You don't suggest that in a professional context, but it's the least optional scenario.
Right. And the truth is, of course, there are times you do need investors, you do need a job, but those are the moments when you are not focused on meeting new people. Those should be the moments where you go to your existing contacts and you say to them, hey, can you help me meet new people? And then they are the person who is brokering the introduction. Nobody wants to meet a desperate person for the first time. It's a terrible impression if you're connecting and reaching out to someone when you are needy, quote unquote.
And that's why the next two types of networking are so important. So let's look at number two. The second type of networking is what you call long-term networking. Okay, explain the difference between short-term and long-term networking. And then we'll get into what I think is the most interesting, the third type. But second type, long-term networking.
Yeah. So long-term networking is what I would say most of the best networkers do. And that is basically just identifying people. Typically, these are people in your field, in your industry, and you say, wow, they seem great. They seem like they're doing cool things. We can probably help each other over time. I don't specifically know how. It's not like I have a particular ask in mind, but they seem like the kind of person I would want to get to know. And you just start building a relationship with them, because who knows, in 10 years, maybe they can help you. In 10 years, maybe you can help them. We'll see.
But the best kind of networking, in your opinion, is what you call infinite horizon networking. Explain this one.
Yeah. So infinite horizon networking is probably my favorite because I feel like this is the most overlooked form of networking. Even people who are generally considered to be masterful networkers, some of them do not engage in this. And the reason is that infinite horizon networking is networking with people that seem irrelevant. You might look at them on the surface and say, why should I spend any time getting to know them? They're an astronaut. Like, okay, that's great, but I'm a communications consultant. That doesn't really seem particularly useful. And that's correct. In the short term, it's not useful at all. But it's interesting. And so if we're busy optimizing for interesting, that's a good thing to do. But B, the fact that it is not plugged in with your usual channels actually means it has the potential to be some of the most transformative relationships, because they are exposing you to ideas, to people, to opportunities that you are never going to hear about otherwise. And those are the things that sometimes can really be quite powerful in terms of resetting the contours of your life.
Excellent. And finally, when it comes to networking, what do you mean by every relationship has to be reciprocal? I think this is also a concept that most people don't appreciate. Every relationship has to be reciprocal. Explain that.
Yeah. So of course, we all know intellectually that when you have a friendship or any kind of relationship, nobody likes to be in a position where they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm always giving to this person and they're just merrily taking. Like, that doesn't feel very good.
They begin to resent that. And you see that like in marriages and relationships, right? That's what people tend to start complaining about. It's all me giving, right?
Yeah, not a good dynamic. But what is the challenge here is that sometimes in a relationship, particularly if you are, I say in air quotes, the junior party, maybe you're, maybe you're not as old, or you're not as senior, or you're not as connected, or whatever, you might want genuinely to reciprocate, but you're not sure how. You're like, oh, but he knows everybody, or, oh, but she already has this super successful business. What could I ever do? And this is where a lot of people fall short, because they throw up their hands and they're like, oh, well, guess I can't help them. And, that's not the recipe for success. The challenge and how people can earn these relationships is by taking the time to figure it out. And it is not easy, but you have to figure out what you can actually contribute to these people who have been helping you. Typically, this is my life hack, it is not in the same form. If someone actually is super well connected in your industry, it's true, they probably don't need your help with that, but they probably need help elsewhere. Maybe you can help them because they want to run a marathon and you have run 5 marathons and can help them with their training plan. Maybe they need help because they're visiting a city they've never been to, but you know it really well, and you can make a bunch of restaurant reservations for them. Whatever it is, maybe you can help their kid. This is often a really big thing. People, they want their kid to have informational interviews, but look for the angle in the way that you can be useful.
I like what you're saying. Be creative. Be creative. That's very important. Dorie, one more thing before I let you go. I need to ask you this because this is very important. I like to focus on the art of writing and writing skills, which I do not believe that many business professionals are giving writing the recognition it deserves. And the reason why I'm going to ask you this question is because you are not only an instructor, but you are a writer of best-selling books. Let's talk about this art and the skill of writing. Do you find that graduates and business professionals, do you find that they are good writers, or is there, to put it kindly, room for improvement? That's question number one. And two, what role do you think good writing plays in one's career success?
Well, I'm a little biased for sure, Carmine, because I am very
and maybe
passionate.
You're not the best person. I just thought maybe you're not the best person to ask. You are a little biased. No, but you're a good writer and you teach business students. So,
well, I'm biased for a reason, which is that I genuinely think it is important.
Yeah.
And I also think it's ironic, but typically the professionals who are quote unquote, the best educated in terms of their credentials and the programs they've been through, college, graduate school, oftentimes are some of the worst writers, because what academic programs teach you to optimize for in your writing is not what makes for a successful business writer. Academic writing is often very thick, it's jargon laden, it is a little bit abstruse, it's heavily Latinate. You have to really concentrate and read it with an enormous amount of focus, even to just understand what's being said. And in a fast-moving business context, you can't afford that. If people are busy, which they are, you're going to lose them, and your message is not going to be conveyed. And frankly, that's your problem. That's not their problem. So we need to retrain ourselves. This is something I very much had to do. So I know and have been through this process of the kind of academicization of one's writing. The closer that we can come to writing clearly and in a manner similar to how we speak, the better we'll be able to capture people and going back to your previous question, being persuasive in our writing, such that we can understand what people need to hear and help them see the facts, so that hopefully we can mobilize them and get everybody steering in the same direction.
Well, Dorie Clark, thank you for helping all of us think more long-term. I appreciate it. And it really was a joy to meet you. I've been praising your work and citing you for many years. So it's nice to take this relationship to that next level, the infinite horizon relationship, hopefully.
Amen to that. I love it, Carmine. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dorie Clark. I've been a fan of her books, her articles, and her LinkedIn courses for a long time. I think you can see why. For more conversations with experts who can elevate your career, subscribe to Carmine Gallo TV. New videos every week. I'll see you next time.